run you through a little presentation first, but I thought I'd put them up front so you have them in your mind as well, because I've had them in my mind as I've been pulling together the slides for today, which are an introduction to the work that TEXA does. But the questions that your organisers asked me to think about was the primary goal of our system. How do we balance our respective roles? And that's a really big question for us in Australia at the moment. And if I have time, I'll explain why. Who our assessors are and how we guarantee their independence. The strongest evidence that what we're doing is working. And if there's one thing you could change about your current system, what would it be? And again, that's a really topical question for me at the moment. So hopefully I'll have some time to come back to all of these questions, but I'm going to try to answer them as we move forward today. Next slide. Thank you. I'll just give you a little snapshot about Australian higher education at a glance. These are the data itself on number of students enrolled is actually from 2023. Like many systems across the world, we can sometimes have data lags. We're expecting the 2024 figure any day now, so we'll be able to update that. My understanding is that enrolment figure has stayed relatively static. I also wanted to give you a picture of the providers that we regulate here in Australia. So as at 30 June, we have 211 providers. My understanding is that we have just accredited another provider, but we have cancelled the accreditation of another. So we should still sit at about 211 providers today. 44 of those providers are what we call universities. And for us, we have a definition of what makes a university, and it's predominantly around undertaking both teaching and learning, but also undertaking research across a comprehensive range of disciplines. We have 8 university colleges, and then we have 159 institutes of higher education. And the thing that largely defines an institute of higher education as separate to a university is that they don't traditionally undertake research, and certainly don't necessarily undertake research in the way that an Australian university does. Next slide, thank you. I think the next slide tells you a little bit about us. So who are we at TEXA? That's our minister, our current minister on the slide. I actually spent some time with him yesterday. I might reflect on that a little bit if I get time later on in this presentation. So what's really important is TEXA is a statutory independent government agency. So we are government, but we are not part of the Department of Education. We sit separately and independently from the Department of Education. We have, for a government agency in Australia, we have a relatively unique structure. So we are governed by a commission. So a commission is like a board or a council, but we call it a commission. We have a 4-person commission. We actually had a commission meeting today. We have one every second Wednesday. And our commission are essentially our regulatory decision makers. So we being the agency, provide advice to our commissioners, and then they will make the regulatory decision. And they are all 4 independent persons who are chosen for the particular skills that they bring. Many of them have worked in the sector, but they cannot work in the sector now to undertake a commissioner role. And they will undertake most of our regulatory decisions, but not all of them. All of our commissioners and our CEO are appointed by the Minister of Education, and technically the Minister for Education is my CEO's boss. We're actually quite small, comparative. We have about 120 staff, and that 120 staff includes a corporate team, so a team of legal advisors, HR, IT, and the like, to help us run the agency. Just to compare that to the National Vocational Education and Training Regulator in Australia, they have about 350 staff. So we're relatively small and lean in the higher education sector. TEXA as an agency is relatively young. We were actually established in 2011, and we were established by a piece of legislation that we call the TEXA Act. There's some interesting things going on with the TEXA Act at the moment, which we'd love to bring back to you at some point in time. We regulate in accordance with what we call, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, what we call the Higher Education Standards Framework, or as we call them, and I'll call them for the rest of this presentation, the threshold standards. that standards framework was updated in 2021. And I'll talk about those a little bit more later. I should also note that we are something called an ESOS agency, which stands for Education Services for Overseas Students Agency, which means we also have a role to play in international education delivery in Australia. And I'll touch on that briefly again later. Next slide, please. Why are we here? I would say that second main dot point is actually the most important. We are here to protect student interests, to ensure that students enrolled in Australian higher education providers, regardless of the type, have the best experience they possibly can. We're also here to protect and enhance Australia's reputation for quality higher education, to ensure we remain internationally competitive, and to ensure that we strive for excellence. Diversity, it's really important to us that we have diversity in our higher education offerings, from small boutique private higher education providers through to very large comprehensive universities, and that we maintain our reputation for innovation. It's also really important to us that we protect and enhance academic integrity. That has become a very sharp issue in the last few years with the adoption and management of things like generative AI. And that's been a focus of our agency over the last little while. And if I get a chance, I'll talk a little bit more about that. And I'm flagging areas where you may wish to ask me questions as well. Next slide. Thank you. We don't operate alone. We are independent and we sit independently, as you can see from this slide, but we certainly operate within an ecosystem. And that ecosystem in Australia has evolved quite a lot over the last couple of years and continues to evolve at the moment. So as you can see, TEXA reports to the Minister for Education, and the Minister for Education, Minister Jason Clare, obviously supports the Department of Education. Within the Department of Education, and I have some colleagues joining me today from that department or from this division, there's a higher education division who support us and who also support the Higher Education Standards Panel. I highlight the Higher Education Standards Panel because they're responsible for continuing to update the threshold standards. So we at TEXA regulate against the threshold standards, but we don't create them. One way we like to say that is that regulators shouldn't create their own regulations or their own rules. We regulate the rules, we don't make the rules. We also have another series of bodies who work in our ecosystem. I've named a few of them here. There are others, including a gender-based violence unit within the Higher Education Research and International Division. I actually think that's cut off from the bottom slide there. We have the Australian Tertiary Education Commission, which is a newly established commission, and in fact the legislation for that commission is still working its way through our parliament, so it should say Interim Australian Tertiary Education Commission. We have a National Student Ombudsman that is relatively recently created that supports student complaints and issues, and we also work really closely with the Fair Work Ombudsman, particularly when it comes to any issues of wage underpayment. Next slide, thank you. There's a few things we like to call ourselves. And this goes to some of the questions, discussion questions that you posed in the way that we regulate. So we're not an input-based regulator. So we don't go and measure things that providers do. So for example, number of students per classroom, or the space that providers might occupy, or the staff and student ratios. We're what we call a principles-based regulator. Our threshold standards, and I'll show you some of them a bit later on, are principles-based. So they provide an objective that we're seeking providers to achieve, and there are lots of different ways that the providers can achieve that particular standard, as long as they are achieving it and can show us evidence that they're achieving that particular standard. But it isn't a one-size-fits-all, and it is very much based on the concept of principles. We also have some overarching principles, as well as the threshold standards, which are principles-based. And our three legislative principles are regulatory necessity, reflecting risk, and proportionate regulation. What some of those things mean are, so proportionate regulation, for example, means that we regulate where there's impact in the activity that we might do, so that we don't over-regulate and that we don't under-regulate. So we make sure that the work that we're doing is proportionate to the issue that we're seeing. So if it's a very minor issue that we might be seeing within a provider, we will work really collaboratively and collegiately with that provider just to solve that quite minor issue. If it's a major issue, we might take some other steps with that provider, and there's lots of different steps that are available to us. We make sure that we regulate according to where we see risk and where we see issues within the sector. I'll talk about that a little bit more. But the first principle is what we call regulatory necessity. And this is about if we see an issue, we act on an issue. So if we learn about some intelligence for a particular provider, then we need to act on that intelligence that we receive. We can't ignore issues within the sector. Next slide. I mentioned our standards framework. I'll talk a little bit more about the threshold standards. So the threshold standards establish the requirements for providers to enter the sector, and I should say to stay in the sector. So that's what is meant by must be met for continued registration. So we expect that providers will meet all of our threshold standards all of the time. Now, of course, that's almost an impossible ask. We know there'll be times when providers don't necessarily meet the standards that have been set out. And in that case, we'll be looking for the way the provider responds to that issue and the way they improve their systems for next time. But essentially, our threshold standards must be met all of the time. And importantly, for some of the people in this room, that means that they also must be met regardless of delivery location. So if you're looking to enter a transnational education partnership with an Australian provider, the Australian provider will provide an Australian course of study, we expect that the threshold standards will be met in Indonesia, just as they would be met within Australia, if it's the Australian provider involved. They also establish baseline requirements for quality and integrity. So there was a discussion question that was posed to me for this event around whether we regulate according to sort of quality or compliance, so sort of a baseline. We do both in different activities, but in relation to our normal regulatory activities for a provider to enter and stay within the system, it would be fair to say that we aim for compliance with the standards rather than measuring how far above the standards a provider meets, a provider is attaining. So we do look to that in some of our other activities we do as an agency, but when we look to register and continue to register a provider, we're looking for a baseline compliance with our threshold standards. Our threshold standards provides a framework for internal monitoring. So when we are flagged an issue with a provider, we always look to where they are breaching or potentially breaching a threshold standard. If a provider is undertaking an activity that doesn't relate at all to our threshold standards, we can't really do anything about that. That's not very common. They're pretty comprehensive, the threshold standards, but at the same time, there are some issues that don't fall under the threshold standards. We're also looking, particularly in some of the other activities that TEXA undertakes for quality assurance, and we are always looking for continuous improvement for providers. So if a provider comes to us with an issue, we are always looking for the way that provider responds to the issue. That's of most concern to us. Instead, we know things will happen. Things happen in providers every day. Next slide. This is a bit of a sneak peek into our threshold standards. I have provided later in the presentation, which I'm not going to run through, each of these 7 domains, we call them. So these domains represent the minimum acceptable requirements for higher education in Australia, and if Australian qualifications are being provided offshore. There are 7 domains. Each domain has an awful lot of detail underneath them. I've given you some insight on slides later on because I'm happy for these slides to be circulated. And we try to make sure that these domains and the way that they're expressed are student-centric. So you can see that we try to cover all elements of a provider activity, from student participation and attainment, the learning environment, teaching quality, research and research training, institutional quality assurance, because we want providers to be responsible for their own quality assurance and compliance with the standards. Governance and accountability. I would say I probably read section 6 more than I read any other section of the threshold standards. And then section 7 deals with things like information management and representation. So things like boards and councils. You're welcome to read our threshold. I read them a lot. I've provided some more detail later in some slides, but these are available on our website. Next slide, thank you. I said we call ourselves a few things. So we're a principles-based regulator. We're also a risk-based regulator. That looks like a few different things. So when we introduced our principles in 2011, when we were established as a regulator, we wanted to give a high degree of autonomy for the sector, because we knew that there was providers within the sector who had a high degree of maturity and a high degree of what we call self-assurance. A high degree of autonomy allows for risk-based regulation. That doesn't mean that we don't see issues with mature providers. In fact, we do often. We've got a couple of big examples at the moment. But what that means is that we assume that providers have mature systems in place to manage their own risk, and that we can have some intelligence and data that tells us when that isn't happening, and then we can go and work with a provider based on the risk that we're seeing, rather than having to examine every single thing every single time we meet with a provider. Some of our providers are what we call self-accrediting, which means they can accredit their own courses, design and accredit their own courses within a framework. And some of our providers are not self-accrediting. So we have providers who sit at different levels of what we might call academic maturity. But I should emphasise that we see issues across our whole sector, and that we're always looking at risk data and risk intelligence to pick up issues across every single provider if we need to. All of our universities are self-accrediting. That doesn't mean that we don't work with universities, though. We do. Next slide. I think I've said a lot of this, and in the interest of getting to questions, I might jump over this. But as I said, you'll have these slides after this event. So next slide, because I wanted to get to how we actually, the activities we actually do, which I think is the next slide. So I wanted to just mention how we regulate, or how do we regulate. So we do a few different things. We have what we call our cyclical or planned assessments. So these apply to providers differently, but they do apply to all providers. So if a provider wants to enter our system, so become an institute of higher education or a university, they must undertake an initial registration with TEXA, where we look at compliance with every single domain that we have. So the 7 domains that I outlined before. It's a very comprehensive assessment. We also look at the people involved in setting up that institute to check that they're what we call fit and proper persons. And we also look at the financial viability and sustainability of the proposed institute. Every single registered provider, regardless of whether they're self-accrediting or not self-accrediting, must renew their registration with TEXA. The length of renewal can be between 5 and 7 years. We have some actually on shorter than that, but most are between 5 and 7 years, with most of our universities needing to undertake a renewal of registration every 7 years. Again, we use some risk data and risk intelligence to tell us what to look at when we renew registration, but we do take a look at all 7 domains in the threshold standards. But we might look at some more than others, depending on what the risk data and risk intelligence is telling us. We also undertake course accreditation and re-accreditation for non-self-accrediting institutions. And we also, as an ESOS agency, undertake international student assessments. So by that, I mean, if a provider wants to deliver education to international students, they need a special registration, for want of a better phrase, called a CRICOS registration. And we issue those on behalf of the Department of Education. That also has a renewal around every 5 to 7 years. We also regulate using what we call non-cyclical assessments. This is where we receive information from any source, whether it's a complaint, whether it's a media report, whether it's other forms of intelligence that reach us. We undertake what we call a compliance assessment. So if we receive concerns that a provider is doing something that isn't compliant with a threshold standard, we'll investigate that as a compliance assessment and see what's happening, and then we'll work with the provider in lots of different ways. Sometimes those compliance assessments can result in a condition on a provider's registration, and in very extreme circumstances, it can result in a cancellation of a provider. We also undertake annual risk assessments of every provider. This is us looking at data related to financial sustainability and viability, and looking at student outcomes. And if we see concerns within that data, then we will work with providers as well. We also do what we call sector-wide or educative work. So we look at thematic reviews of sector-wide issues, and I've got a list on a slide in a moment. We also look to educate the sector, particularly where we're seeing emerging risk. And we're at the tail end of a 2-year program of working with the sector around the management and adoption of generative AI. That started as a piece of education for providers. We asked all providers to submit action plans to TEXA. We've assessed those, and now we're working with those who may have received a poorer assessment for that particular action plan. Next slide, thank you. I promised I'd put up a list of some of the sector risks that we're seeing. So we're seeing some risks with what we call institutional governance, and this is the way that there might be governance oversight of all the operations of a university or an institution. We're seeing some issues with the way that our institutes might manage risk. And now I'm not saying every institute is doing all of these things, they most certainly are not. And we have some institutes who are doing none of these things. But these are the sorts of things that we're seeing in the sector at the moment. Issues related to artificial intelligence resulting in award integrity, academic integrity and contract cheating, cybersecurity concerns, delivery of micro-credentials, research integrity, student wellbeing, and international education, be it delivery to students onshore and also delivery to students offshore. Some institutions are managing these risks really well. We are seeing some concerns in other providers, but I'm sure this list of emerging and current sector risks is not overly dissimilar to what you might be seeing in Indonesia. I would certainly think that we share some of the same issues and concerns around artificial intelligence, academic integrity, research integrity, cybersecurity, and the like. Next slide. I'm almost at the end, so you can ask me some questions. Can I get you to flick through about the next 7 slides? So I promised you I'd given you some more detail on our domains. I'm going to let you read these in your own time. If we get right through to the end, so go to domain 7 and then the next slide. Okay, next slide. Back to the discussion questions. I just wanted to do a quick roundup and check that I've sort of answered some of these. Primary goal of our system, ensuring compliance or driving quality improvement. To be honest, for entry is about ensuring compliance, but some of our educative work and sector-based risk is about driving quality improvement. So we do both, but in different ways. How do we balance a rigorous process with administrative burden on universities? We try to use risk. So we try to be a risk-based regulator, so that where we're seeing risk with providers, that's where we'll put most effort. And where we're not seeing risk, that becomes, for want of a better phrase, a lighter touch assessment. Who are our assessors? Our assessors are my team, an amazing group of people. We do occasionally use external experts, and they are people who are independent in the system. So we don't use anyone who's currently within an institution. They all must be agnostic to an institution. But I have a team of assessors who provide their advice to our commissioners who make the regulatory decisions. I'm happy to return to any of these. I just wanted to make sure I'd at least answer them in part. Strongest evidence that what we're doing is working. It isn't evidence we hold, I wouldn't think. Strongest evidence will be in things like our student outcomes data. So if students are achieving good outcomes, if students are satisfied, that means that we're doing our part of the job. So we're not the only people in the ecosystem. We all need to work together for that outcome to be achieved. But I would think if students are satisfied with their education experience, they're achieving good outcomes, particularly in relation to graduate outcomes, then the work that we're doing is working in some way. there is one thing you would change about your current system. We had a big day yesterday. Our minister announced a review of our Act. And the objective of the review of our Act, which will take about 18 months probably to wash through, is that we might be able to focus less on some of the regulatory, because all of our regulatory activities are defined within our Act, so we must do them all. We might be able to change elements of our Act to make sure that the team that I have is focused where we have the most impact, so that we might be able to do things differently where the impact is lower and only touches a few students, and that we might be able to do things in a more fulsome way where it touches a much bigger group of students. That's particularly related to the work that we do around sector risk. So that's probably what I would change, and I feel very fortunate that I now have the opportunity at least to try to change it. It's an exciting time to be working in TEXA. I'm going to stop there. I probably have 10 or 15 minutes to answer questions if that doesn't put your program off too much. But I'm in your hands now.
Thank you, Ibu Jen, for your very insightful presentation. So, ladies and gentlemen, the independent agency regulating 211 higher education providers with TEXA system. And there is also an issue of balance of compliance versus improvement. So it's very interesting. Thank you so much. Without further ado, I would like to invite the audience, but I would like also to acknowledge the presence of Professor Fatul Wahid, Rector of UII. Thank you so much for attending our FGD. Yeah, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the university is considered to be the eldest in Indonesia. Is that correct? Yes, it is. It's the eldest, and this is the youngest. This one. Okay, so Professor Fatul, I would like to invite you first to give comments or ask questions to this presentation of Ibu Jen. You know, perhaps you might share your hundreds of years of being existing as a UC university. Please.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Jen, for insightful presentation. So I was late. So I was having a program this morning in Jakarta, and I'm happy to be able to join this second session. So I would like to share my opinion about the accreditation. So as you mentioned, Ms. Jen, in your first questions, the primary goal of accreditation is either to complying or to maintain compliance or to improving quality, because these two choices will have the specific impact on how we perceive the accreditation system. For example, if we see the accreditation system as a compliance system, then we will striving to maintain the minimum requirement to pass the minimum standards. And if we see it as a tool to improve the quality, then we will see the accreditation system as a leveling system. It's like a ladder. We have to move from one level to the next level. From the point of view of well-established institution, the second one, the latter, will be very beneficial, because you will have already the capital to stand out. It is very beneficial for them. But if we see on the ground, especially in Indonesia, for example, to maintain the equality among all the players, to leveling the playing field, then the former will be the choice, because it's not always easy for developing institution to level to the next level, to improve the level on the accreditation system. I wonder if there any like a good combination, a trade-off, how we still maintain the equality, but at the same time we can drive the quality improvement. Is there any experience from Australian context?
It's a
Thank you.
real dilemma oh, sorry, I just jumped straight in. It's a real dilemma for regulators, I think. For us, with 211 registered providers, our core role has to be in ensuring that all 211 are fully compliant with the threshold standards. So that isn't a consideration of the way they are, say, above compliant or exceeding compliance. And we're having this discussion internally at the moment, so it's a really, it's topical for us. But it is our core job that all 211 providers and any new entrants into the system are compliant with all 7 domains. If we're doing that as a regulator, we're doing a good job. But we don't want to just operate in a system where we're doing a good job. We do want to identify quality and what quality looks like and a strive for exceeding compliance. But we're not the only person in the system aiming for that, or the only entity in the system aiming for that. And I think you've hit something really important in your consideration, which is the role that institutions play in demonstrating quality. For us, we would hope that our providers, mature or otherwise, are also finding ways to show how they're above compliance, and then the sector can uplift to those demonstrations. We do have elements of our work where we do try to highlight exceeding compliance or above quality, or the sorts of things that we're looking for. But I will be honest, our key and core role is making sure that all providers in the system are fully compliant all the time, because we know that that's going to be one of the best outcomes for students. No students would be having a poor experience. So they're my reflections on that question.
Thank you, Ibu Jen. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Because time is extremely limited, so I would like to limit this question and answer with 2 people only, Pak Rector and the Dean of our faculty, please.
Thank you, Pak Alpha. Thank you very much, Jen, for your very informative session about the TEXA. So I would like to confirm my understanding about self-accreditation authority. So self-accreditation authority, it is inside the university itself. So each university have like assessment mechanisms to do their own assessment. If that's the case, so this is in line with this morning recommendation actually from the director of the general self-accreditation body, that he said that the aim is to improve the quality of higher education, and this should be done by maximizing the function of the internal quality assurance system. So that's I would like to have my confirmation about my understanding. And the second is I would like to ask that in your slide there is international student assessment. Could you elaborate on what it means by the international student assessment? Thank you. Thank you.
That was code. That was 2 words for quite a lot of work. Going to your first question. So yes, your understanding is right. First of all, an institution can't decide to become a self-accrediting authority. They have to apply to us to become one. When TEXA was established, all universities were automatically given self-accrediting authority, and we have a number of providers who apply to us to become self-accrediting who are not universities. So at our commission meeting earlier today, I can't tell you the name of the provider, we actually approved self-accrediting authority for a particular provider earlier today. What we expect that means within an institution is exactly that, exactly the way you described. So an institution will have academic boards, a way of ensuring that what they're delivering in the courses meets academic standards as outlined in our threshold standards. So we examine that first before we issue self-accrediting authority, and we expect that the provider will maintain what we saw throughout their life as a self-accrediting authority, because we can remove it. We can even remove it from a university. That would be under extreme circumstances, but we can take that away. But it is our understanding that many institutions have incredibly strong academic boards and academic processes. and do an excellent job of accrediting and for essentially re-accrediting their own courses. And that's one of the beauties of our system. Your second question could take me a long time. In short, when a provider wants to deliver education to international students, there are particular risks that we might see. We want to make sure they have the right support systems in place for international students because they're a very vulnerable cohort. We want to make sure that they design their academics in such a way that's appropriate for international students, and that they're supporting international students throughout their journey in Australia, because international students are so important to Australia in so many different ways. There is a particular act that supports that called the ESOS Act, and then there is a code, a legislated code underneath that. We do an assessment that checks the provider has everything in place underneath that code and that piece of legislation. We also review and renew that registration. We do a few other things in relation to that as well. For example, when a provider wants to increase the number of international students they actually have to apply to do that with us. And when they want to deliver to international students at a different location, they also need to ask us for permission to do that. So there's quite a lot of work involved in that phrase that I put on the slide, but it's lots of different assessments that make sure a provider has the processes and systems and governance oversight in place to really support international students during their time here in Australia.
Thank you, Ibu Jen. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. It is always interesting to assess the issue of striking a balance between quality improvement and compliance, as Pak Rector just mentioned. And Ibu Dekan also raised very important issues. And I think I just want to wrap up for a few seconds. Lesson for Indonesia, I think we have to think about adopting a proportionate approach to reduce administrative burdens. Maybe use independent assessors, maybe foreign assessors from external expert pool with independence guaranteed through commission. And one potential change, what is also interesting is what Ibu Din also said is self-accreditation for mature providers. I think I don't know if we have already arrived at this stage yet, but I think this is the thing that we have to think about. So thank you, Ibu Jen. Thank you so much, for attending our FGD. And then I would like you to give applause to her. Ibu Jen, if you want to stay at the Zoom, you are free. If you feel that you have to go, you're also free. Thank you so much. We would like to proceed to the second speaker. Allow us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. I'll stay for a little while until my son gets home from school. No, thank you.
See you later. Thank you. The second speaker is Bapak Kamal Khurana. I already introduced him to you, his profile. I would like to invite you to come forward. You want to?
But I will be able to connect your team with our accrediting agencies to move forward in this direction. India has a vast and complex higher education system. It includes universities, colleges, and specialized institutions offering a wide range of programs at undergraduate, postgraduate, and doctoral levels. This whole system is overseen by the Ministry of Education and regulatory bodies like the University Grants Commission, abbreviation is UGC. The National Assessment and Accreditation Council, NAAC, we call it NAC. The Medical Council of India for the medicinal education, All India Council for Technical Education, AICTE, etc. The AICTE is basically for the technical education like engineering and stuff. So UGC, which is University Grants Commission, is the primary body responsible for the coordination, determination and maintenance of standards of higher education in India. UGC's recognition is crucial for universities and colleges to be eligible to offer degrees and for students to have their qualifications recognized. Then there is the National Assessment and Accreditation Council, NAC, which is an autonomous body that assesses and accredits higher educational institutions. NAC is funded by the University Grants Commission. So the UGC primarily approves and funds universities and colleges, while NAC focuses on assessing and accrediting these institutions based on their quality and performance. Think of it this way. UGC gives the permission to operate, while NAC gives the stamp of approval for quality. The NAC provides a grading system for higher educational institutions in India ranging from Alpha++ to D, with A++ being the highest. Like I think you may have good, very good and excellent. Okay. This grading is based on a cumulative grade point average, CGPA, derived from various criteria and parameters including teaching, learning, research infrastructure and governance. The grading system helps students and other stakeholders assess the quality and performance of institutions. NAC takes the following key areas into account when assessing the accreditation of higher educational institutions in India. First one is curriculum aspect. This includes the design and relevance of the curriculum, its alignment with learning outcomes, and its responsiveness to the need of students and society. The second parameter is the teaching, learning, and evaluation. This assesses the quality of teaching methods, the effectiveness of learning experience, and the fairness and rigor of evaluation processes. The third parameter is the research, consultancy, and extension. This area evaluates the institution's research output, its engagement with consultancy projects, and its outreach activities. Student support and progression. This assesses the support system available to students, including academic guidance, career counseling, and financial assistance, as well as their progression through their studies and into their chosen careers. Governance, leadership, and management is another key factor which the NAC looks into. This evaluates the effectiveness of the institution's leadership, its governance structures, and its management practices. Institutional values and best practices assesses the institution's commitment to ethical values, its promotion of inclusivity and diversity, and its adoption of their innovative practices. This was the general overview I thought to share today, but I urge your team to visit websites of UGC and NAC to get more information on the education system of India. So once again, I thank university. And before thanking, I just thought one of our colleagues, Mr. Hakim, asked me to specially mention the subsidies the Indian institutions are being provided for the students. So we in India give priority to the right to education. And many people, students, they come from poverty, poor families, and there is a huge subsidy provided by the government to the government institutes where the books, bursaries, food, reading material is provided at a highly subsidized price. I thought I should highlight this, and this is an appropriate forum for all of you to know. So once again, I thank university for hosting us and providing the opportunity to come together and discuss such an important topic, ensuring that the younger generation is well prepared to thrive in an increasingly competitive world. However, if you want some more insight, the Indian higher education institutions are broadly classified into universities, colleges, and specialized institutions. These can be further categorized into central universities, state universities. India is a huge country. We have central universities, state universities, and deemed universities, followed by some private universities with its own funding and operational structure. This is a new education institutions coming up. We call it PPP, public-private partnership kind of play. Institutes of learning, because government sometimes is not, though government tries to provide education to each and every individual, but help from a private entities, private educational institutions come is very helpful. So we have central universities, state universities, deemed universities, private universities. Then we have specialized institutions, institutes of national importance. These institutions are established through Act of Parliament, like the very famous IITs, IIMs, AIIMs, which is the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, and NIT's National Institute of Technologies, known for their higher standards and specialized focus. Students from these universities are doing great, not only in India, but making India proud across the globe. Then we have affiliated colleges. These colleges have a specific university and follow its curriculum and guidelines. We have autonomous colleges also. They have more flexible and independence in their academic operations compared to the affiliated colleges. We too have some standalone institutions. These are independent institutions that are not affiliated with a university, such as polytechnics, where these are called some of the vocational courses, 2 years diploma courses, where students who are not following up for the degrees, they can go for a 2-year program and then start their own self-business kind of startups. This diverse range of institutions ensures a wide array of academic options for students in India, catering to various interests and specializations. Thank you so much. And still, if you may have queries, questions, some technical queries, please stay in touch with us in the embassy, and we will connect you with the accrediting agencies in India, NAC and AICTE, University Grants Commission. You'll get more insight over these things. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you. But maybe you may have a seat here. Yeah. Thank you so much. Forgive me if I just catch up just a few institutions with your presentations. The National Assessment and Accreditation Council, or NAC system, is an autonomous body under the University Grant Commission. Since 1994, assesses and accredits higher education institutions with objective instrument. Exactly. And there are 3-step process: self-study, peer review, and grading.
Yes.
Yep. Okay, and focus on quality assurance through criteria such as curriculum, teaching, learning, research, and governance. But what is important and relevant to our discussion is the shifting to a binary accreditation system. That you've been shifting to the binary since the recent reform, which classifies into mature and not mature. Starting in April 2024 to simplify processes, increase transparency, and reduce administrative burdens. But I think we'd like to discuss that. I'd like to invite the audience, and maybe you can please respond also to what I've been reading.
Yes,
I would like to invite ladies and gentlemen to raise questions or give comments, please.
If they have some queries.
Yeah, and then I would like also to invite distinguished participants online in Zoom. If you would like to ask questions or give comments, I would like to ask Mbak Afra at the roof.
I'll try to answer whatever possible I can.
To detect maybe somebody has been writing in the chat.
But they cannot
Column.
expect some technical questions which, which is out of my domain. But definitely, yes. If I'm not able to answer, I will definitely note down the questions and then we will get back to the participants.
Okay, online participants, no questions? If I'm not mistaken, I saw that there are almost 30 people online. Okay, I would like to invite people in the audience here. Please, please do raise your hand or, yeah, Pak Lukman, please.
Well, thank you. This is maybe not a question, it's more like a comment. Just I would
Please.
like to give additional insight about how India works with their education system. Well, I think India is very rapid, in their development in education because they have measurable target in their face. Like I have mentioned during my stay in India, they mentioned that they have target number like thousands of PhD graduate from India. I mean, they have this measurable number. And they, as he mentioned just now, that they subsidize in such a way to support the brain of the people. For example, they subsidize the paper. So if you purchase books from India, it's very cheap. It's only 20 rupees, for a book, which is in Indonesia it might be 200,000 rupiah. There's only like 20 or 25,000 rupiah in Indonesian money. It's very cheap with low quality paper, but then it's okay, right? Yeah, I mean the quality wise it is not very good, but the content is there. So that is something is missing with our system. Maybe how to create a system that support people's brain. During my stay in India, I could afford to buy like 5 newspapers per day, which is very cheap. Like Indonesia, for like Kompas newspaper, you have to spend a lot of money, right? So this kind of thing, what do you say? You have the system which is supporting the people's brain that I think we need to learn from India. Okay, I think that is my share.
So we believe that strong education builds a strong nation. So if the foundation is strong, the nation will grow. So the more we are able to provide education to the masses, the better the society is going to be, especially when the world is getting more and more competitive. So that is the aim of our government, and we are moving forward in that direction.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I believe Pak Lukman bought a lot of books when he stays in India. Okay, I would like to invite more people. Just one more questions or statement. Pak Rector, you want to say something? Do you want to say something?
Thank you. So this question might not directly related to the accreditation policy, but I met my a few Indian fellows in some occasion, especially in the international forum, and I understood that in India it's very common that in almost every university has vice rector or specific unit responsible for global ranking. There's a vice rector for global ranking or something like that.
To some extent, but it's not always.
Oh yeah, that's why. So that's my question. Is that a part of like a national norm that being endorsed by the national government? And what the relation between that initiative with the initiative for quality improvement?
Okay. Yes. Well, I don't think this is the norm. People generally follow, if I understand your question, you mean to say that people follow more the global rankings. Okay. Am I right?
Yeah.
Am I correct?
Yeah, the tendency.
When we are in a competitive world like this, the more the ranking is, the better, people think that it will jumpstart their careers. They want to be more competitive. They'll get good opportunities. So obviously ranking plays an important role. But again, that is not the sole. Government of India never goes by ranking, the government wants to impart best education as far as possible. Ranking is for the individuals to, it is an individual's prerogative. So I think this is what your question was, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes,
Yes.
people,
I was thinking that it's like a national norm.
No, it's not a national norm.
Okay,
Obviously, it's not. Obviously.
Okay, so thank you so much, Bapak Khurana, for participating in our discussion. I think it's been very fruitful and very
In fact,
highlighting for us. Yeah.
it was an honor to be here to talk to all of you. In fact, I'm very new here, so
Just last week.
it gives me immense happiness to meet the faculty and the university members. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir.
And
Yeah.
I would like to take leave now because I have to attend another meeting.
Okay, so thank you, please.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Is it
Oh yeah, I would like to have a token of appreciation.
token of appreciation before you leave, sir?
The sign that you have visited us. This is the sign.
I'm so grateful. I'll remember the day. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'll remember the day. Thank you so much. Please take care.
Pak Rizal nanti minta PDF speech beliau. Saya ending this, and then I will give it to you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so thank you so much for attending our last session. And the trends, I would like to stress, I would like to highlight that the trends are shifting from strict compliance to quality improvement through risk-based regulation. Yeah, like identifying risks like AI, cybersecurity, student well-being. In the US or Europe, accreditation is becoming more flexible with enterprise risk management for categories like business model risk and enrollment risk. And globally, regulators like the OECD recommend aligning and minimizing burdens through digital tools and proportionate assessments. So the evidence of success like increased enrollment and innovation in risk-based countries like Australia, as we listened to Ibu Jen. The common challenges is academic integrity, micro-credentials, one desired global change, more international collaboration for mutual recognition and of accreditation. So what is relevant to us, ladies and gentlemen, is comparing how Indonesia can revise the regulation number 53/2023, like Pak Lukman mentioned in the morning session, with Australia's model, risk-reflective self-accreditation, and India's binary system when they move to binary system to make accreditation a driver for innovation rather than a burden. So thank you so much. I would like to end this by saying Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin, and then I would like to invite our Dean, Ibu Nina, Prof. Nina, to officially end our FGD today. Thank you, Bu Nina.
Thank you very much, Pak Alpa. Well, finally we finished earlier, and I would like to thank all of you who have come. And after this, I will close first, and then we will have photos together here. We have distinguished guests, and Bu Fitri, you don't have any photos yet. You need to have photos with us. Thank you very much. Hereby I close this FGD and seminar by reading Hamdalah. Alhamdulillahirrahmanirrahim. Let's everybody here have a seat in the front, and then we will have photos together. Yeah.